Hi everybody, it's Steve here from the ISE hosting today's webinar. So thank you all for joining on this. Well, in London it's a rather grey Friday. It does look like it's about to rain, but it hasn't done yet. So we're holding out hope. Really pleased you can join us today. This is continuing our series of webinar. We try to do sort of one or two every month, and really pleased to have Rob doing this webinar from U-Explore. The idea for this webinar came from our survey launch, which happened in the middle of September. So for those of you who know the ISE well, every year we do two really key pieces of research that are annual surveys. One is the development survey that comes out in March. The other is our annual salaries and vacancy survey. So as part of that event, we launched that, but we also had a couple of speakers and Rob from U-Explore, did a really interesting piece on the work they're doing in terms of, highlighting what their findings from their START student survey. Because one of the things we as the IC don't do is we don't actively go and survey and do our market research with students. That's not our audience. Our audience is people like yourself. So we very much, get the business to business labour market data. So that's why we love to work closely with people like Rob, because actually they provide an insight to us and you, our audience. So the way the webinars work, I will very shortly hand over to Rob. I'll put myself on mute. So hopefully you can all see Rob's slides on the screen. So Rob will take us through the presentation. With this webinar software, you will see that in one of the boxes there's the opportunity to ask questions. So if you want to ask a question, feel free to type it in there as we go along. Rob will keep an eye on those questions. So if it's pertinent to actually what he's saying or what he might say, he might answer it then. But then at the end of the formal bit of the webinar, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions again, either in that text box or to actually use audio. The other thing is that we do also record this webinar so that actually if you want to catch up on it later, or if you want to pass it on to other members of your team, you are free to do so. So that's all from me. So are you okay to take it from here, Rob?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And I assure you it's grayer and rainier up here, so enjoy it down there. Thank you. So thank you for everybody for coming today and giving up your Friday lunch times. I know they're quite precious to most of us, so I do appreciate it. Today we're going to talk through just 5 of the insights that have come out of the student survey. There is a full sort of document that we're going to produce on the outcomes of the survey by the end of the year. So if you're interested, we'll leave some details at the end so we can get a copy of that to you. So when we were at the event earlier in this year, we did a hands up moment. I appreciate this won't work well over webinar, but we did a hands up about how many people in the room are doing a job that they thought they would be doing at school. And to my relief, only one person actually put their hand up, which just showed the fact that we need to help our young people, guide them towards the careers that they might be interested in future, rather than at the moment where we highlight some very popular roles. There's roles that are out there in the media that become very visible to students, but getting across the huge plethora of roles that are actually available is extremely difficult. So we at START are trying to achieve this goal. So START, just a bit of information, is a free online careers information platform for young people. So it's free to use. Young people can sign up either through their school or themselves, and in fact adults can as well. It's open to anyone. We try to help students make informed choices about all stages of their journey. So it's not just about what's the right job for you. It's about making decisions at GCSE level, making decisions at A level, and all the way through to university to try and help guide them into the right areas that will get them into the careers of their choice in the future. We help schools and colleges as well track progress against the Gatsby benchmarks, and the Gatsby benchmarks are a framework of 8 guidelines that define best careers provision schools and colleges. So we try and help schools by giving them feedback on what their students are doing on the products and the choices they are making. And we also work with a lot of employers to try and help them broaden their reach with young people through through the website itself, through sharing content on there, but also helping them identify schools that they might want to interact with. We collect vast amounts of data about young people, and some of that data help us get away from the traditional ways of looking at students in terms of are they male and female and how old they are. Now, when I first came in, that was literally how we looked at it, and it'd be no surprise to tell you that males want to be games designers and females want to be beauty or makeup artists. Those are the top choices, but obviously within every group of people, there are people that have interests and work preferences, skills and qualities that are so diverse that just trying to identify people based on gender is obviously next to useless and doesn't really help in terms of guiding those people. So we're using a lot of that data now to try and use machine learning to start to look at groups of students in a bit more detail and try and define them in different ways, which means we can help them better. So one of those ways that we are doing that is, instead of using that male-female split, we're using what we call the personas here. So to give you an idea of what these personas are, they are based on users' interests. And so we have across the top, for example, we have the groups. There are 3 groups called social. And those social groups share interests like advising people, helping people, working in communities. But then there's also things about those groups that differentiate them. So for example, the social creative group in the top left-hand corner, they also like things like art and drawing and photography, whereas the professionals tend to like things like law and teaching. So this is helping us define how we interact with students in a different way, and also starting to lead us down routes to personalize the product to help get the best results for students on there. So the START annual survey was something we started doing last year. Now last year we got about 4,000 students using it. But this year we have been working with The Guardian through Guardian Jobs to try and get this across to more students. The Guardian Jobs wanted to help us because they have youth at the heart of what they're doing in Guardian at the moment. So for example, they have 1 in 2 students that read theguardian.com and also interact with 1.4 million parents of 15 to 18-year-olds as well. So this means that they were able to give us extra reach to the survey. And so thankfully this year we got from 4,000 all the way up to 13,000 students taking part between the ages of 11 and 18. And this is across 530 schools, which is up from 330 last year, and across 130 local authorities. The split of respondents is slightly more female than male, 40 to 57, and 3% of our students preferred not to declare their gender. Overall, we got more than 680,000 answers given, which, as I'm sure you can appreciate, gives us a very good wealth of answers there to come back with some good analysis of what students do feel. The topics we cover are about future study and career intentions, so what pathways they're going to take, their interests in qualifications and subjects, career aspirations and work preferences, readiness to enter the workplace, and then career-related experience students have had at school and how helpful they are. So there's some big outcomes that we immediately pulled out of it. So compared to last year, we've seen a reduced interest in apprenticeships. So we asked students about what's the next thing they want to do when they leave their school or college. So further and higher education is the highest choice, and that's over 50% of students want to follow that course. But last year, apprenticeships was about 11% of students choosing that as their next pathway choice, and this dropped down to 9% this year. What we see here is a massive split between males and females, and although it dropped over both groups, you can see the amount of females choosing it is very small. We can see as well that females, as we approach the year 11, actually drop in interest in apprenticeships. And there's a few things that we've picked out that we think are actually interesting about how those results come about. So there's two questions we asked. One about whether they have talked to parents about whether they'd be happy with them doing an apprenticeship instead of a degree. And the big problem here is that over 54% of students said they don't know. Now, we do a similar question, it's not exactly the same, about expectations of going to university. And for that, we see the percentage of students that don't know what their parents think drop right down to 27%. So clearly students are having conversations about going to university, but they are not having the same conversations about apprenticeships. The other concern we have is that the amount of students that think an apprenticeship will lead to their dream job or career also drops off from year 7 to year 11. And again, it's a constant drop, especially for females. And again, the concern here is that students and young people aren't seeing apprenticeships as something that will lead them to jobs and careers that will be beneficial for them in future. And I guess we within the industry and we as careers company know that some great apprenticeships out there, but whether that message is getting across to students is obviously unclear, and is not, our data doesn't seem to suggest it is. And I guess the other concern that we've got there is there is a crossover between students saying they'll go to university, they're interested in going to university and interested in doing an apprenticeships, but it's fairly small. So students aren't seeing it as something that they can do both. They're seeing it as one or the other. And so we need to work together to make sure the message is getting out both to parents about what apprenticeships are so that they can have that conversation with students, but also the message that there's some really high quality careers that can be accessed through apprenticeships out there that students should be interested in. Number 2, industry interest and awareness is narrow. So again, we ask students about what jobs they'll be interested in the future, and give them a choice of 8 jobs, and which industries they'd be interested in pursuing those careers in. Now, this is multi-choice, so students can pick as many as they want of both sections. And the top jobs were designer, business manager, and a doctor or nurse. And we saw some good links there to industries. So doctor or nurse links into the top industry being health and social care, and then designer links into creative and media. And the third industry was education, which linked into actually the 4th job, which was teaching or lecturing. The business manager was an interesting role because there was a fairly good link from people wanting to be a business manager and people seeing that they could do that in any industry. So there was a wide range of industries picked when they picked business manager. The concern that comes out of the data here is for areas like software developer or data analyst, where only 18% of students pick that as a career. So we've already got rid of 4 out of 5 students saying they're not interested. But again, when we were in the room earlier in the year, we asked for a show of hands about which industries need software developer, and clearly at the moment there's requirements across all industries for software development. But students are seeing primarily digital and IT as the industry where they will do software development. They are not seeing that there's a broad range of industries where they can do this. And we have conversations here with our employee partners about attracting that sort of talent. As you can imagine, I'm sure most of you out there require digital and software development talent. And so it's a big thing for a lot of companies. But the interesting thing is when we've gone to look at their websites with them, you can see that most employers concentrate really well on the jobs that you would expect to see on their websites. But when it comes to jobs such as software development that you need, but it's not a primary role that the industry is known for, then it's much harder to see those roles prominently. And so we can understand why, if students are looking around to try and find where they would follow their career, why they're struggling to see different industries as those where they could follow it. So one of the things we've been talking to our partners here about is about making sure that you are highlighting not just the roles that you have in abundance and that you recruit fairly easily, but also those roles that you really need and where you're battling for the same people that many other companies are, making sure you're highlighting those. And again, talking to some of our brand partners, what we've said to them is that if you can collaborate as an industry to show those roles are there, and then compete as companies to actually try and get that talent. Number 3, students are prepared to travel for their careers. So again, what we saw from the data we got is that students are willing to travel, or say they are willing to travel a long way to get their dream jobs. There was 60% of students said they were prepared to relocate across the UK or wider, and 35% of students saying they would be prepared to travel worldwide. There was also a strong link about with the qualifications that students were aspiring to achieve. So we tended to find that students that were just trying to achieve GCSE level entry positions weren't as willing to travel wider, whereas those that were traveling, expecting to get degree or master's level positions were willing to travel much wider, in most cases worldwide. So this might be something you want to think about how you approach attraction strategies. So for entry-level roles that do require GCSEs, it might be that you do go for a more regional approach for those ones. But for those higher level positions, just make sure you are engaging at a national level and make sure students across the country are aware that those roles exist and where they exist. One question we were asked in the presentation earlier was that around research showing that people don't move from where they were either born or where they went to university for jobs. And I guess this is one where we need to think about how we advertise positions. We obviously haven't got data about what students have done after the survey because we've only been running this for 2 years. But if students go onto a website, a jobs website, the traditional way of finding a job is to enter a job title and then enter a location. So we need to find a way to get around this so that students aren't just looking at their local location or big attraction centres like London, and are actually finding ways to identify where jobs are and where hotspots are across the country. Oops, sorry. Jumped on too much. So 4, employer engagement increases confidence. Again, we have a lot of conversations with partners about, is what they're doing actually having an impact? We asked students as part of this survey about what types of engagements they've had. So this might be things like work experience, visits to employers, careers events like careers fairs, and visits to employers and workplaces. So there's 6 different options they can choose. We also ask students about whether they feel they are confident to go into the workplace and get a job, and confident they have got the skills to do so. And what we've really seen, particularly in the high year groups, years 10 and 11, is that the more different types of employer encounters those students have had, the higher their confidence is. So not only are you getting into schools and getting your brand out there, making them aware of what you do and what's available, you are actually helping students feel like they are confident and that they have got the right skills. So clearly you can see that though you may not get that feedback immediately, it's coming across in our data that everything that employers are doing with schools at the moment is really helping students get ready for that work experience. And as you can see from the graphs, in most cases, we're doubling the number of students that feel they are confident or have the right skills. So that's really great news for our students that are getting that experience. So again, we also ask students a variety of other questions, and one of those questions is about what are their drivers and career motivations. Now, no surprise, salary is the #1 priority for students. But we can also see there's other things there, particularly a good work-life balance that students are already considering as high priority. So 80% of students said they want a salary, good salary, and 71% saying they want a good work-life balance as well. There's another nice thing that comes out of that is, I guess, this view certainly that gets stereotyped about young people wanting to be famous and that being their main driver. It's very, very few, and we tend to see that's the younger students as well. So it's highest at year 7 that they want a job that makes them famous, and as they progress through school, that becomes less important. Going back to the slides I introduced on personas, there's also some interesting things that came out there, in that we saw the creative personas we had on there. So the ones that were interested in artwork, photography, drawing, that sort of interest. We've got two groups called the technical creatives and social creatives, and those two groups, when we asked it in the same question but in a slightly different way where they could only choose one option, rated that they wanted a steady job, which means they can live comfortably, higher than wanting to work and earn a lot of money. So we can start to see the subgroups starting to have slightly different opinions on things, and that might be something you'd be interested in terms of changing your attraction messages for different types of students. So if you're trying to get more creative people into roles, then highlighting the work-life balance within your careers might be a great way to do so. So just to go over those key points again. In summary, we need to start promoting the opportunities that apprenticeships provide earlier, and to make sure parents are being included in that conversation so that students feel at least comfortable that they know what their parents' opinion is. We also need to make sure that students are aware of exciting opportunities in apprenticeships, whether they be immediately following schools or all the way up to the degree level apprenticeships. We need to make sure students are aware of the wide range of roles available in your industry, so that things like software development, data analysis, they are not just digital and IT roles, they are roles that are required across all industries and provide some really good career opportunities through every industry there. We need to tailor our attraction strategies to suit qualification level of the role. So as I said, regional is probably suitable if you want just entry-level positions, but on a national level, you'll get a much bigger pool of candidates if you can get the attraction spread across the country. The careers interventions you're all doing as employers are really helping students. You're helping them develop skill and job confidence, so do keep those going. And as I said here, good salaries are the main driver for most students, but do tailor your communications for those with different motivations to make sure you are promoting the values of good work-life balance and making a positive difference that students might have. So thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate your time. As I said, we will be releasing a full brochure with all the results in by the end of the year. So if you're interested, please do get in touch with us, and we'll open it up for any questions you have.
Thanks, Rob. That was really useful. Have you seen a question in the question box, which was around the data? How does the data break down by age groups? I wonder if you could explain a bit more on that.
Sure. No, so my questions aren't showing, so I haven't seen anything. But so all of our data is linked to an individual student. So the data we can split out by their gender, year groups. So was there something specific about year groups, or was there just a general, can we do that?
I think it was just general, looking at the question online, unless anybody wants to chip in.
Yeah, so just generally, we can split all our results down to year group level, to gender level, and to anything like school or local authority, Obviously, a lot of employers like to know the local schools' opinions on things, so we can do that sort of analysis as well.
Thank you. I had a question, Robert. I was struck actually by the #1 finding, which is that the interest in apprentices is dropping amongst pupils, because you think actually with the increasing level of just noise around the subject, as more employers come on stream with their various programs, the government pushing more and more this message through things like, the Fire It Up campaign. It seemed counterintuitive that it would actually go down. You think worst case scenario, it would stay flat, but with all the effort and expense, you think it would go up.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess one of the main findings there was it was mostly in the younger year groups. So I guess the concern is whether those messages are impacting at year 11. Year 11 didn't drop year on year, so it might be a good news story that year 11 didn't drop year on year. So in actual fact, where students coming to that decision point, it's fine, it didn't drop. But the concern is if they're not reaching younger year groups as well, then they're not going to be aware of the opportunities, they're not going to be aware of the benefits of choosing that against other pathway choices. And so even if we just see a slight percentage drop each year because they're not persuading enough people to see them as positive, then we might see that decline year on year at the year 11 level as well. So yeah, it is concerning, and it's also concerning, like I said, that they're not seeing, like I say, the great career opportunities that are available through apprenticeships. And as a father of a young child now, you have to sort of question, would your child want to have the huge debt that they build up at university versus getting into a position through an apprenticeship where you're getting paid, not building up debt, and learning a skill, learning a trade early. And I guess one of we don't know detail about why students aren't seeing these things as being positive. I guess, slight concern, because we see this huge gender gap, is perhaps still apprenticeships have still got a feeling of the old trade qualifications that they used to be, and that's why males are slightly more interested than females. But like I say, we don't know that. We do know other things, such as students recognise when we have different activities on our site, and they understand what a degree level apprenticeship is. I guess through the naming, it makes it very obvious. But the other levels, there's much less recognition of what level those qualifications take you in at. So again, there might be things like naming things that just aren't sort of resonating with students.
Okay, got it. Actually, Rob, if you double click on the questions box, it pops out onto its own. That might be able to see them, because I've just opened that up and I can see a few more questions coming through. So one of them was actually, because I know it was a national survey, but is there any insights you'd have on maybe a regional basis? Do you think there's a difference between sort of urban and more rural, or differences between regions in terms of your analysis?
So we haven't looked at it on a regional basis, so we certainly could do. So if there's regions that people are particularly interested in and they wanted to know whether certain things were higher, lower, getting different answers, then I'd quite happy, if people want to get in touch and ask that question, then we're quite happy to look into those things.
And a question from Dave as well about this distinction between roles and jobs, and do you think there's anything around this whereby actually Dave mentions the digital piece, so somebody may not understand that digital roles actually are available in almost any sector at the moment, everything's becoming digital, or do they kind of think as manufacturing is stuff and digital is tech companies?
Yeah, and I think that's definitely what's come out of this survey. Is students have a very narrow view of where jobs exist. So yes, at the moment, it's obviously not every student, because they do pick other industries they're interested in as well. But like I said, for software development, that link between software developers' choices of job and the industry is really strong. 79% of software developers chose digital and IT as an industry to pursue that career. And the highest of all the rest of the industries was about 30%, and the average is about 20%. So you can see that's much lower. Obviously, there are some that naturally fit that, doctors and nurses in the healthcare sector. That's fine, but for the most part, it was, like I say, only business manager was the one where they selected across industries, and it was broadly the same level of interest for all industries. For every other, we've still got this perception problem that if you want to do this job, then you need to go into this specific industry, rather than the broad range of jobs that exist in all industries. So yes, that is still a very high correlation between job and where you'd expect to see that industry, rather than jobs being across all industries.
Got you. A question here from Jack. Jack was asking, from sort of all the data that you presented and your findings, what do you think are the main practical applications, for employers when they're actually out there trying to influence this market?
Sure. So I think there are definitely things we can do straight away. So like I say, we have a lot of discussions with partners about advertising roles that aren't traditionally linked to their industry. So one of the first things you can all do is think about the jobs that you are trying to recruit, that you find hard to recruit, and have a look at your websites, particularly your any that you have specifically for young people, and just check that those jobs exist on there, because we've literally gone on other partners' websites, had a look, and you can't even find the jobs that they're desperate to recruit, because they're concentrating on ones that are traditionally within that industry. So that's definitely something you can do. The apprenticeships piece, again, you're all going to have fantastic roles that you have, so just make sure if you're doing school engagement that students are really aware of the routes they can go into different careers. So yes, they can go do their A-levels and do a degree and then go into the same jobs, and that's great if that's what they want to do. But also they can do this by doing A-levels and then going into an apprenticeship at that point, and they will still come out of that with a qualification that's recognised, as well as being already within companies that can then help them progress their career even further. So that's two immediate things. And then, like I say, there's other things on there as well. So salaries are very important. But like I said, there's other things that need to make sure students are aware that you are promoting, so that you do promote good work-life balance, and they are aware of how that role makes a difference, a positive difference to your company and, if applicable, society as well.
Fab, thank you. I think I'm looking at the other questions, and I think we've sort of covered most of the questions in there. Will was asking actually around, which I think you sort of answered, and if there's anything more you'd add to this around, what is it that students are particularly looking for when employers visit schools? And I wonder, I guess from my point of view, do you think there's any mistakes that employers make when they visit schools and are just completely off the mark in terms of what pupils are actually looking at?
So that is very interesting. We don't have any feedback from school visits at the moment. So that's something we are working with our partners to start to try and track. So we're going to start working with them to understand when they are going into school, what they are presenting within schools, and then gathering feedback from students that have been to those presentations. So it's not something we've got any specific data on at the moment, but it is something that we are hoping to implement in the very near future, to start to track that and to help our partners start to tailor that communication even better.
Thanks. I was at an event last week actually that was put on by the Institute for Apprentices, Department for Education, and it was all for intermediary organisations like us, and it was at Westminster, and it was quite interesting being there, because because sometimes the levy's been in place for a little while now. There's the message around apprenticeships and careers in schools has been running for a while, and it was one of the things that struck me was actually the focus from the Department of Education to really still wanting to get these messages out there amongst pupils, and trying to make sure that pupils are getting that voice and that reaching out to organisations to help the message through. So I think if anybody's thinking that there's any sort of waning of interest in this from a policy point of view and trying to drive the policy forward, I can there's not, absolutely, despite some of the, I guess, the slowdown in policy due to the whole Brexit scenario. That's still that drive from those officers to keep the momentum up.
Yeah, exactly, and from employers as well. To be fair, there's a lot of employers out there trying to get the same messages across and to try and increase interest in all manners of things. And there's a lot of great people all working together to get those messages out there. So yes, there's definitely no decline in that at the moment. So it's still great stuff going on.
Well, as we just, when you presented this at our survey launch, I mean, I was initially surprised that our data actually just around vacancies showed such a healthy market because of the nervousness, the cost pressures people are under. I was expecting the market to be relatively flat, but to see a 10% increase in graduate vacancies, school leaver vacancies increasing almost at the same percentage. So there's definitely still a buoyant market. And then again, if those of you on this webinar haven't had a look at our survey data as well, it's worth looking at. There's sectors where employers are still not filling all their vacancies. So this is still a very tight labour market, and I think it's going to get tighter because the demographics show that the number of 18-year-olds is still falling and will do for sort of, I think, 2 or 3 years yet to come, that before it starts going up again. So as vacancies increase, the number of actual bodies is decreasing. So I don't think the pressures in this market are going to go away at all. Are you happy for people to get in touch with you, Rob? You've got I noticed you had your email at the end of the slide for any follow-up questions.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, please do.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Rob. Thank you everybody else for joining the webinar. That's been highly interesting. There was a question on there asking about slides. Absolutely, the slides will be available, as will a recording of this webinar, which we will get sent out shortly to you all and also to other members. So feel free to pass it on. So that's great. Thank you all for your time. Everybody have a great weekend. Those of you whose half term is next week and you've got some time off, enjoy the half term. Speak to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.